Hello, 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 and welcome to Project Possible with me, Rich Lee. Today's episode is another one of those, as I mentioned in last week's Mary Manderfield episode, curiosity gap episodes where it's looking at what's truly possible from a knowledge perspective. And in this case, is it truly possible? Is it possible to change your life while you're dreaming, when you know you're dreaming? I think so. Charlie Morley, today's guest, knows so. He works with CEOs, entrepreneurs, business leaders, top athletes, military personnel to support them with habits, mental health, and performance by supporting them in their subconscious. Does it sound wooey? In short, he works to get them to understand how to dream and know that they're dreaming. And then in that dream state, you could practice conversions, penalty kicks that you'll tennis serve 1,000 times. You can, find the things that might be impacting you from a PTSD or complex PTSD perspective and work on those things. He works with business leaders to change patterns, habits, thoughts, and it's a fascinating specialism. So yeah, we got off to a great start chatting about hip hop and just went into what I think is an absolutely brilliant episode, talking about something I didn't really know that much about. I'll get into my thoughts and experiences with lucid dreaming and all of that in the episode. But all that remains to be said is, without further ado, I bring to you my conversation with Charlie Morley. Enjoy. Charlie.
This is the foreplay bit.
This is the foreplay. Now we're recording. No, that stays in.
This listeners, I tell you what.
This is the foreplay. Well, welcome to Project Possible. Hello, Charlie. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here for the main event after the foreplay.
Hey, I might not last that long, but we'll see. If that gets edited out. We were just chatting before we started, and I know we're going to get into lucid dreaming and your specialisms, but one of the things, you had a TED talk. You've been blacklisted by TED Talks. Can you explain what that is before we get started?
Yes, and also you can have a world exclusive. The blacklist is being lifted. So after a year of battling with, well, I shouldn't say battling, they lifted it, of kind discussions with TED, they have now agreed to lift the blacklisting as long as they can edit out 30 seconds of the offending talk. So basically the thing that TED had a problem with was at the end of the talk, the main kind of punchline is I'm talking about how these scientific studies we did using lucid dreaming, working with traumatized populations, and we got some really crazy results. In 1 week, we had the average PTSD score drop so low, learning using these lucid dreaming practices, that 80% of people were actually free of clinical PTSD. So they didn't meet the medical criteria anymore. And then at the end of the talk, I say, and since that study, we've done a randomized control study, which is the gold standard, and we replicated results, which is true and was true at the time I did the talk. But the paper hadn't been published at the time the talk came out. I had seen the paper, I'm in it, so I knew what the results were, but it hadn't been published. So I get it. They were saying I was referencing a paper that hadn't actually been kind of authorized or published yet, which is true, but I knew that by the time the talk came out, the paper would be out, blah, blah, blah. So yes, but it took some wrangling and some back and forth, and it's a big organization, so I think that's why it takes so long. Yes, they had agreed to lift the blacklist, and to be honest, it was quite cool because there's something a little bit kind of mysterious and sexy, as one person said, about having a blacklisted TED Talk. So, why is it blacklisted? Let's all go and watch it. So I think maybe that even helped with the views.
I've worked in PR and marketing, or did before setting my company, for a very long time, and there's nothing cooler than a band ad.
There you go.
Okay. You got the Ricky Gervais stuff going on right now with his vodka, right? It's TFL won't allow this. It's you're not even I've done plenty of those sort of things. You're not even submitting it to TFL. You've got the idea, and you suppose, or maybe you ask one person there.
I wondered if that was.
No, you never. Rarely would you even submit, knowing that you'll get banned.
So that is the advert.
The advert is the fact that it's exactly that. So before we get into lucid dreaming, as I say, and we've touched on it very briefly there. You have a background as a performer in another realm, in another world. What was that world? What did you do?
Yeah, so I was in acting and music and hip hop and stuff from quite young, from like a teenager. I was in like a moderately successful live hip hop band when I was a teenager, and then I kind of did a little bit of like solo MCing and spoken word stuff. And then that eventually led to hosting breakdance events. And then hosting breakdance events, it eventually led to kind of organizing them, and then eventually having this hip hop collective called Throwdown, which I ran in my, throughout my 20s, basically. And we were a group of breakdancers, beatboxers, DJs, graffiti artists. We even have a pole dancer in the group once who did like pole dancing to hip hop and stuff. And that was a very cool way to spend my 20s.
I had to use the Wayback Machine. Don't know if you've ever used that, the Wayback Machine online. It's basically where you put the domain in, because the domain's dead now, but you put the domain into Wayback, cool. And it shows you snapshots through time. So you can literally go back now to 2009 on the Throwdown website and see the pages. And so you can see all your descriptions.
Cool.
You know,
I didn't know that existed.
It doesn't work perfectly all the time, so you can see some images, not others. Flash player was a big thing back then. So so if you don't have Flash for some websites, you know, you can't see all content. But so I saw on there Hobbit.
Oh, well, you've done more digging than me there. Right?
I like to. I saw Hobbit, the beatboxer, and I came to Hobbit through Killer Keller, the beatboxer, which was through breakdancing, which I was moderately unimpressive at, acts like that. So like, before we started recording, we were chatting about, I guess, that UK scene. Who were you inspired by at the time, MC wise?
Who was I inspired by? So MC wise, I was probably inspired more by the poets, like the guy called Saul Williams. I'm sure he's still working. He was really good. MC wise, I was really into the flow of a British group called For Life Cypher. So we were working with a lot of British hip hop acts, but I guess I was inherently influenced by American hip hop. Like, you asked me recently what I'd been listening to, and I said that my missus came into the kitchen a couple of nights ago when I was playing Redman and Method Man, and said word for word, "Is this your midlife crisis music?" Actually, I didn't tell you. My reply was, "No, I've had a midlife crisis already. This is just because I like hip hop."
Exactly. And as we said before, the funny thing is that would have been what you listened to 20 years ago, nonetheless. And I mean, you know,
I do feel a bit old because I can't get this mumble rap thing.
It's not for me.
For me, a good rapper with the clarity. They could be incredibly fast, like double time rap, but hear every word. That's what made a good rapper. That's what made good flow. And I mean, I'm showing my age now, but it just seems when I listen to the mumble rap, it's the opposite. It's like they're offbeat, they're lazy, and you can't hear anything they're saying. And that's a good mumble rapper. And I'm like, wow, maybe it's some art form that I'm yet to understand. And maybe there's a hidden in like being offbeat and being unclear and not enunciating your words.
I'm the same as you. Like, I love Talib Kweli, Most Def, Pheromones, you know, like those, and you know,
opening one so good.
Those kind of rappers where it is about the enunciation, and also how they play with the enunciation, and you know, and the, as we said, the assonance, and you know, like turning a rhyme into a half rhyme. And
Kanye's first album.
Listen,
like, you just think, how is the guy who made that the same guy who?
I talk all the time. College Dropout is one of the best albums of all time. Illmatic, everybody always says it, but you know, it's true. Nas was 19 when he wrote that. When he did that album, 19, same age Mary Shelley was when she wrote Frankenstein. And just to make you feel really like you've done nothing in your life. They've like absolutely done these world-class works of art.
But I think actually 19. That age, if I look at some of our most creative times, it was probably around that age too, because you've still got the kind of creative freedom of childhood, the echo of childhood. You know, you're still a teenager, but you're stepping into adulthood. So I think it's a really creative time, that kind of late teens, where you can have some really, and if you look at a lot of sports people, when people really peak, it's late teens, early 20s. And we think, oh, but that's because the body, you know, the body ages and stuff. Well, I think some clarity of the mind might age too. I mean, the mind gains wisdom as it ages, which maybe the body doesn't have such kind of such an iteration of that wisdom. But also there's a clarity of mind in the late teens, which I think you get a lot of really good creative output in those ages.
And I guess there's, you know, that propensity to avoid risk as you get older, right? We don't like, would I 38, I love rap, right, but I sound like this, so that's probably, you know, like, unless I'm going to affect an accent, I probably shouldn't rap, right? You know, nobody needs to hear this rapping.
But nowadays, it's all about the kind of regional accents. I remember when I was a teenager, and when I first started rapping, when I was like 14, 15, it was American accents.
Yeah.
I did American accent for the first like 2 years until I saw Mud Family, Skinny Man. And I was like rapping in like what I thought was a Cockney accent. Actually, Skinny Man originally was from Leeds, so he's got a very interesting accent. But until I saw UK hip hop live, I didn't know it was allowed. I thought the only way to rap was in an American accent, and then you see it and it sounds good, and you're like, oh, okay. I can now.
So you got Bugsy Malone or Stig of the Dump and people like that who, you know, you listen to Stig of the Dump and you think like he's not trying to hide it in any way, shape, or form, and you know there's a pride to be taken in that kind of regional accent now. But
exactly, so you could absolutely start rapping and using your own accent.
My point was, at 38, am I going to do that? Am I going to have the balls to do it? Where as a teenager, maybe I would have done. You know, that's the no, I just thought it's an interesting segue because. Or an interesting side conversation to have, because what you did there, you're performing to people, you're understanding the audience, you know, it's about message, it's about clarity, and then we get to lucid dreaming. So do you want to explain to us what lucid dreaming is, please, and what you do?
Yeah, so a lucid dream is a dream where you know that you're dreaming as the dream is happening. So it's not just a really vivid dream. It's not a dream where you see future events. It's not an out-of-body experience. Doesn't matter about the content of the dream, whether it's a nightmare or a sexy dream or a fun dream or a traumatic dream. Any dream where you're sound asleep, but in the dream, you go, oh shit, I'm actually in a dream right now. My body's asleep in bed. This is all a huge 3-dimensional projection of my own mind. I am inside a dream. And then with that awareness, we can then decide what to do. I can fly through the sky, you can have sex with movie stars, you can do loads of fun stuff, and then eventually you get to the point where you realize, well, I'm literally conscious in my unconscious. So then maybe I'm in a similar state to hypnotherapeutic trance. Absolutely you are. But actually, you know, in hypnotherapeutic trance, you're going into the kind of shallows of the subconscious. In a lucid dream, you're going right to the bottom of the iceberg, simply because you can't get more unconscious than asleep. So the depths to which you can go in a lucid dream, you're conscious in the depths of the unconscious. And a bit like hypnotherapy, you can treat the similar kind of stuff with lucid dreaming. You know, you can use lucid dreaming for addictions. You can lucid dreaming for confidence. Big benefit of lucid dreaming is for trauma, nightmares, PTSD. And also, you can use lucid dreaming for fun. You know, the hypnotherapeutic trance that we might go into for addiction therapy is actually exactly the same hypnotherapeutic hypnotic trance that the person in the pub will put someone into in those like comedy pub hypnosis shows, right? There's actually no difference between the trance. It's what you use it for. So when I learned lucid dreaming at like 16 years old, for the first few years, I just used it for like fun. Right, I was just like having sex, skateboarding. I'd become lucid, and I'd be like, "Hot girls now," and the whole dream had become an orgy and stuff like that. And it was great. I mean, I was having a lot of early nights. Right, I was like, "Oh god, it's amazing."
It's 5 o'clock. Where's Charlie?
You could.
Dinner's getting cold.
You know, you can learn to do it. So, yeah, I learned to do it, and then
what got you interested in lucid dreaming at 16? That's really like, how did you even know what that was? Because we're talking like 26 years ago. Was it
yeah,
even in public consciousness?
Younger. So my 12th birthday, I asked for I used to have one here. I put it away. I asked for something called a Nova Dreamer, which there's a new generation of them out now, these sleep masks that you put on, and they've got a little computer in them, and they recognize rapid eye movement through sensors. And when they recognize the rapid eye movement, they flash lights. And for the first couple of weeks, you just dream of traffic lights. Like every night, oh, why am I dreaming of traffic lights? Then eventually you realize, oh, that's the lights becoming incorporated. So after a couple of weeks, you train yourself and you'll be in a dream and lights flash and you go, oh, wait, that's the mask. Oh, wow. Boom, I'm in a dream. So these masks, and the one back then in the 90s was called, well, 80s then I guess it was called the Nova Dreamer. And when I was 11, there was this like, I don't know if I know we're a similar age, but you're a bit younger. In the Sunday papers back in the 80s, you used to get these like gadget magazines that came in the Sunday papers. And for a kid, that was like the best bit when your parents are sitting there reading the papers. I'd get this gadget magazine, a mail order gadget magazine. And in it, they had this thing, this Nova Dream. And I remember reading it saying, oh, you can have lucid dreams where you know that you're awake and you can control the content of the dream. And I was like, I have those. I've had those before. This mask says I can have more. And I remember asking my dad for one for my birthday. And I don't know, it was, $300 plus postage and packaging. So my dad said no. But he's confirmed that was a true true memory. And so I was just, I was like 11 when I first was interested in lucid dreaming. Then I don't know what happens. I just go back to being a kid. And then when I'm about 15, I started getting interested in like consciousness and psychedelics. I started smoking quite a lot of weed. So I guess that kind of expands my mind, or allows my mind to kind of see things from a different perspective. So then this thing which gives you access to your mind, allowing you to control, again, I say that in inverted commas because it's not about control, but I thought it was at the beginning, to control your dreams, sounded really fun. So I got some books from the school library and then like taught myself how to do it formally. And yeah, started having lucid dreams. And then when I was 17, I had really bad nightmares. I had like what I can now see is like full-blown PTSD from this like drugs overdose that I had. I was like really wild before I got into Buddhism. And from that drugs overdose, I was having these really bad nightmares. And then I remembered in those books I'd read that you could use lucid dreaming to cure nightmares. Apparently, if you could become lucid, if you could wake up in your nightmare and know, oh, I'm not really back in that traumatic drugs overdose, I'm just dreaming about it, this is just a memory replay, then you were able to either change the dream, and literally change the memory while you're in it, or at least you could wake yourself up.
It's very Nightmare on Elm Street, isn't it? Nightmare on Elm Street is exactly that. It's where it's the second that they realise that they have the capability to change their dreams and show Freddy that they're not scared, and those things. That's when the nightmares are no longer murderous, and they take control.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's in Nightmare on Elm Street 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's the one where he turns somebody into a giant puppet with their veins, which I remember as a kid. Yeah. It's
like that. Yeah. Once you become lucid, you realize, well, nothing can hurt me now, and also this is just a memory. It's like the difference between being in a horror movie and watching a horror movie. When you become lucid in a nightmare, it's still scary. It's like, fuck, man, this is a horrific nightmare I'm having. But you know that your body is safe in bed. This is all a three-dimensional projection of your mind. You're in like a virtual reality replay of the traumatic event, and you can now change it. You can choose to change the ending of the dream, or even better, we found in research now, is for people to stay in the dream, to stay in the nightmare intentionally. You basically want to do the opposite of what you usually do. Right. Because so much of psychological integration about doing the opposite of what we usually do. So we usually wake ourselves from nightmares, we run the other way. Where lucid dreaming says, stay in the nightmare for as long as you can and witness it, because the nightmare wants to be seen.
It's like exposure.
It's like a form of exposure therapy. Within the dream state. So anyway, I managed to do this, and then the nightmare stopped, and I was like, oh shit, this is serious. And then I was like, wow, lucid dreaming is serious. So then I start researching like who's doing serious lucid dreaming. And then I come across Buddhism, and it turns out they've been using lucid dreaming for like 1,000 years in the Tibetan tradition, to use it for like train for death and integrate trauma and do their spiritual practice. So yeah, thank goodness in some way for the drugs overdose that led to the nightmares, that led to the lucid dreaming, that led to the Buddhism.
What overdose was it? What were you taking?
Yeah, it was acid and ketamine.
Okay.
But I know after I had these terrible nightmares, oh God, I would like try and keep myself awake. I didn't like coffee yet. I was too young to like the flavor, but I used to eat Nescafe out of the pot just to try and keep myself awake, because I knew if I went to sleep, I was having the nightmares. But of course, you do that, then you just have extra dream time the next night. Something called REM rebound. I didn't know at the time. It gives you extra dream the next night. So I just have extended nightmares. And that was going on while I was like just about to do my A-levels, and I had like agoraphobia. I had these bad nightmares, I had panic attacks. I remember I got locked in the toilet at school because the sky just seemed too big. The sky was threatening. And I was like locked in the toilet having a panic attack. And I remember thinking like, God, man, they're going to lock me up. Like, I need to be in a psych ward. And it was just there when I was thinking I need to be in a psych ward, I kind of remembered, not that I'd forgotten, but I kind of then became very focused on like, oh, lucid dreaming, that can do it.
Well,
like, it suddenly put all my chips on lucid dreaming.
I remember you've said in the past, you said you don't need to learn how to lucid dream. You just need to remember.
Yeah, because as kids we do it naturally.
Talk to me about that.
Just that, like several scientific studies have shown that lucid dreaming, not every child every night, but for the majority of children, multiple spontaneous lucid dreams as part of their childhood development is completely normal. It seems to be some development of the brain that occurs. So the studies, one of them was on English school children, actually aged 6 to 16, and they found that some age groups around adolescent having between 50 and 100 lucid dreams a year with no training. That's like 1 or 2 lucid dreams a week without doing any training, just spontaneously. That's a very high hit rate. So it seems like lucid dreaming comes factory installed. Like it's actually a normal thing that we forget how to do. A bit like that quote from Picasso, right? He said, every child is born an artist. The adult's job is to remember how. And I was like, whoa, that's like lucid dreaming. Every child is born a lucid dreamer. We somehow forget to do it.
Why do we forget?
I don't know, man. I mean, I've got kind of theories about the time when people stop lucid dreaming is often when we push them into mainstream education. Also, when we stop them playing. Like if you're spending your whole day, like let's say you're a little boy playing with, I don't know, little Lego men or something like that. And you're spending hours a day projecting a dreamlike reality onto reality. It's as if you're playing a video game. And we know now there are lots of studies that show people who play a lot of video games have a lot of spontaneous lucid dreams. Because what's happening in a video game, you know that you're real, that you're playing the game, but you are imagining, you are inhabiting an avatar for many hours at a time, living in another world. And apparently, if you spend enough of your time in that space during the day, you start dreaming about that space, or you start dreaming in that with that attitude of knowing being able to tell the difference between what's real and illusion. So I've got a theory that children, when they just play with their Lego and stuff like that, it's kind of replicating what we found from the video game studies. So perhaps when we stop children playing and force them into education where they do much less play, maybe that kind of atrophies the muscle of lucid dreaming. But I'd say about 1 in 100 people make it into adulthood as natural lucid dreamers. There'll be 1 in 100 people listening to this podcast, but mate, I do this all the time. But what they might not have known is the benefits. Okay. Often with natural lucid dreamers, they say, oh, I do that all the time. And I say, what do you do in your lucid dreams? Oh, nothing. I just know when I'm dreaming. If it's boring, I change the ending, stuff like that. And I'm like, did you know you could use it to work with addiction, to work with trauma, to heal your inner child, to get better at sports, to reprogram your brain, all these cool things that we have the science on. And then they kind of, their eyes light up and they realize the potential of it.
Well, lucid dreaming sometimes gets lumped in with like woo-woo stuff, right? It's one of those things because of exactly what you just said there, where people might forget about it, where like astrology and manifestation and astral projection, and to me, nonsense. I'll probably lose fans there. But what separates lucid dreaming, so I guess, as a scientifically validated practice from the more fluffy spiritual claims?
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. Like, it's been a scientifically verified practice since the 70s. It's actually first verified in England at Hull University. The Americans get a lot of the credit, Stanford, because they did the first neurobiological studies. But actually, the first proof that lucid dreaming is real was Hull University in 1975.
What makes it proven?
How did they prove it? Yeah, it was a cool study, actually. They realized they somehow needed, because people have been having lucid dreams for like thousands of years, right? But the skeptical scientists said, no, there's no way you can be conscious and unconscious at the same time. That's impossible. The brain's either on and you're conscious, or it's off and you're unconscious, right? And lucid dreamers were claiming that they could be sound asleep, completely asleep. Like, what, people think when you're lucid dreaming, you're going to be like looking like you're meditating. A lucid dreamer looks like this. You are sound asleep. You are totally asleep. You're snoring. You're out for the count. So the scientists were like, there's no way you can be in that state and also have full conscious awareness. So you're either lying or you're having what's called a micro awakening, which is where you wake up for a tiny moment in the middle of the night and then drop back into the same dream, giving you the illusion, which is a thing, right? But giving you the illusion that you've had a lucid dream. So they realized to prove it, they had to show the person was, number one, asleep, and number two, that they had awareness of the outside world while they were still asleep. And number three, that they could communicate with the outside world to prove that. So that's really difficult. How are you going to do that? So they thought, well, maybe once the people are once the people are asleep, we'll put a brain scanner on them so we can prove they're asleep. That's box one ticked. And we need to show that they're still asleep while they're trying to do the other two things. The second thing is to get people to try and, once they're lucid, communicate with the outside world. So they thought maybe they can like move their little finger, something like that. So the first thing, they tried like sensors on the little finger. But unfortunately, the body goes into muscular paralysis when you dream, except for the eyes and the lungs for obvious reasons. So then they thought, well, maybe we can use the eyes. And they were doing some studies, and in one of the studies, they saw that when they were dreaming, they saw this person's eyes going left, right, left, right, left, right, like really unique eye movement. So they woke him up and said, what are you dreaming about? He said, oh, it's so weird. I was dreaming about watching a tennis match. And they realized, oh, that's cool. So once you're lucid, your eyes correspond with what you're looking at in the dream. That's rare. That's not the same as in non-lucid dreaming. So they thought that's our key in. So they said, look, once you're lucid in your dream, we've got the brain scan on you. Once you know that you're dreaming, I want you to engage a pre-decided series of eye movements, a bit like Morse code with your eyes, which would be completely unthinkable for the sleeping, brain to create, and thus proving that they knew they were dreaming and communicating. And that's what they managed to do at Hull University. They managed to get these first eye signals.
And that was in the 70s.
Nowadays, yeah, in the 70s. And nowadays, a study that came out a couple of years ago with a laboratory that I work with at Northwestern, Ken Paller's lab, they did a brilliant study where they actually did two-way communication. So they managed, when somebody became lucid in the brain scanner and indicated, yeah, I'm lucid, they did the eye movements, they then put headphones on them. And through the headphones, they were able to communicate with them by speech. Like the audio actually came into their dream. They would say like, okay, are you in there? And then they'd be like, what? Oh my God, I can actually hear the scientists in the lab. And they'd go flick, flick, yes, or flick, flick, no, or whatever it was. They were literally using Morse code in one case. And in that study, when they asked the dreamers, what was the sound of the voice when you heard it? For some people, it came in over a car radio. For other people, it did sound like the scientists in the lab. And for other people, it sounded like the voice of God. It was like, hello, we are the scientists. Can you hear me? So the dreamer kind of incorporated it. And they were asking them maths questions. What's 5 + 2? And then they would think of it. What's the answer? If I was to do 7, and then flick their eyes 7 times to the left. And in one case, a woman was given the maths problem in her lucid dream, and she got it wrong. She said like 8, and then she wanted to like rub it out, so she did circles with her eyes. If they no, that's wrong, and then flick, 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 flick. Right. I was like, that's nuts, man. Two-way communication. Now, the reason why that was so interesting for me was I thought, imagine if there's a time with some of the traumatized military veterans that I work with, who, of course, they can access lucid dreaming by themselves, but sometimes people who are really deep in trauma are even too scared to lucid dream because of what they'll see, even though they know it's not real. But imagine if I could be with them in the lucid dream. So when they become lucid, I'm like, hey, it's Charlie. I'm in the lab. You're safe. Everything you see is your mind. You're dreaming. Your body's in here with me. It's completely safe. I want you to now move towards the source of your fear or whatever it was. That for me would be that would be true lucid dreaming therapy. Really being with someone while they're in the lucid dream state and being able to kind of guide them towards trauma integration. I think that's the like real cutting edge. And it's possible. This study has proved that's possible. So maybe within 5 or 10 years, that will be what we're doing.
What's the biggest misunderstanding about lucid dreaming that people have?
Biggest misunderstanding. I guess some misunderstanding people have is that if it was so good, why isn't everybody doing it? And that's a very good one, because I'm like, good point. And I hope that by the time I leave this mortal coil, it will be mainstream. This will be something you'll be able to learn on the NHS.
There's so much made of psychedelic treatments and psilocybin, and Conor McGregor just went off and had I forget what
Boga, didn't he?
Yeah, that's it.
He's genuinely different.
Yeah, so he says. We'll see.
There are a lot of parallels between psychedelics and lucid dreaming. In fact, some of the results we were getting for trauma treatment were in parallel with psychedelics, like really kind of out there compared to traditional treatments. And it's very similar. In the same way that psychedelics will present you with this kind of symbolic representation of your inner world. You take enough psilocybin, for example, and then like you close your eyes, you see these visions, and those visions, a bit like our dreams, are based upon the internal environment of our mind. This is why if the internal environment of our mind is traumatized, we tend to have nightmares. It's a natural expression. It's the mind showing itself symbolically. Psychedelics, that happens while you're awake, right? When your eyes are open, if you take enough. So very similar. And in fact, I have quite a lot of psychedelic guides and psychedelic therapists come and learn lucid dreaming. And this is because they have told me, and I agree with this, they believe that, or it's been told to me, one of the reasons why people have a bad trip, to use that term, is that they believe that the hallucinations are external to them. That's what makes a bad trip. You're like, oh shit, there's actually a demon in front of me, or an angel, whatever it is, but it's separate from you. Whereas if you know, oh no, this is the psychedelics that are creating this symbolic representation of an aspect of myself, right? But if you think it's separate from you, then things can get really scary. Now, lucid dreaming is training the mind to tell the difference between internally generated hallucination and reality. It's like the whole craft of lucid dreaming is based on that. So the theory is, if you can get a really stable lucid dreaming practice, that will help you to navigate the psychedelic experience much more safely, because you will have had real practice at telling the difference between something that looks real but is actually a projection of your mind. And also through lucid dreaming, you start to make friends with that inner world. So by the time you do psychedelics, or when you get to psychedelics, it's like you know that world. You've seen it before in some way. So I think they feed into each other really well.
It's a funny one for me, because I'm resistant to that kind of thing. I've had a lot of friends say, you know, that with recent trauma and tragedy and things like that, and nightmares that essentially I just, you know, drowned with Jack Daniels, you know, because obviously don't want that. Thank you. Turn it off, you know, escape. And that's, you know, that was the truth, certainly for the first few months, probably longer than I'd care to admit. And, you know, I think I'm the other side of it now, and anybody listening or watching, don't worry too much. You know, I'm doing okay. I'm training, I'm trying, you know, it's ups and downs, right? But and that for anybody new to this is the loss of my brother to suicide at the beginning of the year. So, but you know, I've got a resistance to the idea of ingesting drugs to bring about that state. So lucid dreaming, which is something I have tried, I touched on it before we started. Lucid dreaming is all of a sudden that bit more interesting to me, because I don't necessarily want to just give myself, I know everybody says, you know, mushrooms, it's natural. Algorithmically, by the way, YouTube is going to ping this episode because we've already talked about so many things.
Oh, wow.
Never mind.
Suicide.
Right, yeah. Mushroom suicide.
Break dancing.
Yeah, I mean, the breakdance is the most egregious of all. But you know, there is a bit of me that's resistant to it, but even though it's natural, I get that. But lucid dreaming, you know, something I did try years and years ago. Flying was, you know, that my entry point was, you know, so I did the whole thing where you set alarms for a certain time when you're likely to be in, time-wise, REM, and maybe we can get into some things like that. But you know, maybe it's something that, you know, I should seriously consider. And you know, as soon as I heard about you and talking to, you know, your agent, I thought, oh, that's something I've not. Again, to your point, I've forgotten about this. You know, you completely forget about this as a notion. But let's get more into it for the audience. You train everyone from CEOs to soldiers with PTSD. Why does somebody come to you to help them? Like, let's talk about those business leaders. Let's talk about those CEOs, and then, because I want to focus quite a lot on the soldiers and the British military and these people that you've helped.
I just want to comment on something you said before then, just to tie up on the psychedelics thing, because it was a really good point you had. I would still advise people to try lucid dreaming first, because lucid dreaming, you seem to go to just as deep as psychedelics take you, but you're doing it yourself. There's nothing to ingest. It's totally safe. You're not gonna very few contraindications for lucid dreaming. People worry, oh, well, lucid dreaming maybe go psychotic in the same way as some psychedelics can. Very, very unlikely. Anything can happen, right? But very, very low contraindications for lucid dreaming. And as we were speaking before, the grief of your brother, the lucid dreaming would be a much gentler entry into that space than you might find with certain forms of psychedelics.
I'll be scared at this point with some of my thoughts and you know, the projections that I might have, and the nightmares I was definitely having. I'll be scared of what could happen, as you said, if there was a quote unquote bad trip. I've never taken anything, you know, and you know, I'm one of those goody two shoes, never smoked sort of people. But give me a bottle of Jack Daniels, and you know, I'm a hypocrite, right? But you know, aren't we just a bundle of hypocrisies? But no, thank you. I think that's a really good clarification.
Lucid dream would be a much gentler entry. And also, in the lucid dream, if it gets too intense, there's an ejector seat button, which is called waking up. You know, we've all had it where the nightmare gets so intense.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's over. And you're still shocked for a little bit, but then you're like, oh God, I'm out. I'm okay. And then we continue with our life. Whereas when you're deep in a kind of an 8-hour ayahuasca trip, there's no ejector button. Like you have to kind of ride it out. So lucid dreaming will be more difficult to achieve in the fact that, like, you know, if I gave you 5 grams of mushroom, you're definitely having an experience, whether you believe in it or not. Lucid dreaming, it might take a couple of weeks of practice, a couple of months for some people, maybe first night for some, but there is a kind of level of practice to it. So it takes more effort, but it seems to be safer. So anyway, I just wanted to reflect on that. Yeah.
It's just struck me now, you know, that notion that people talking about their dreams is the most boring point of, boring form of conversation. We're proving that's not true, right? with this, we're proving it's far more interesting than that.
Non-lucid dreams can be fucking boring, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I had a dream of a cat. What does it mean? I Googled it. It says I was a prince in Egypt. You're like, oh, mate, like, God. Because, so many of our dreams are just kind of downloads from the day. Of course, not all of them. Some dreams have profound insight, just like some of our thoughts are profound. But most of my thoughts in an average day are just my ego chattering away.
I'm a big one for our thoughts are not who we are. Your thoughts are not you. And I was speaking to a rugby player called Dan Norton, who one of the best to ever do it, top try scorer in the world for rugby sevens. And he talked about how before going out to play once, or often he'd say, "I just hope I get injured. I just want to get injured." And then he had to recognise with his sports psychologist that he doesn't want to get injured. It's the pressure of the situation that mounts upon him that makes him kind of think, "Oh, if I only got injured now, then I don't have to perform at this level."
Yeah.
It's intrusive thoughts, and he was one of the first to say to me, we are not our thoughts. And because how many times have you had those intrusive thoughts where you're walking, you think, what if I push that person?
Yeah.
You think, well, I'm not going to do it. Well, shit. What kind of awful human being am I that I just had that intrusive thought? That again,
when I was about to become a dad, my missus was like 7 months pregnant, and I was holding somebody else's baby, and I had this really bad intrusive thought of like, what if I dropped them? Not that I want to drop them, it was loud. It's like, what if I drop them? And I started to get the sweats. I was like, oh God, I need to give you back your baby. It was a loud intrusive thought. I've held dozens of babies in my life. I was kind of last to the party in my friend group becoming a dad. And I realized what it was because my body knew that in 2 months, my mind knew in 2 months I was about to become a dad. So it was playing out a worst case scenario. Not because I wanted it to happen, because just like our nightmares and anxiety dreams, we often play out worst case future scenarios, not because they're going to happen, but because our brain loves us. And it's like a fire drill. It's like, but I wonder what would happen if you dropped this baby, or I wonder what would happen if I got injured on the field. It's these, what we class intrusive thoughts. Actually, sometimes we give them a bad rap. They can often be our brain just being a risk aversion. And it's kind of going like, oh, I'm not sure about this. I'm going to give you a nightmare where the job interview goes really, really badly. And it's not because the next day the job interview is going to go badly, but because your brain knows it's a high value event for you. So it's going to give you a fire drill, the worst possible.
So it's like this Dickensian fire drill. It's like, this is the Scrooge got a situation here. Anything better than that's good, right? So
exactly,
I love that. Love it. So what sort of
we can see that, those intrusive thoughts, what is a nightmare, but like a very elongated intrusive thought, often caused by trauma, just like our intrusive thoughts are often caused by trauma. It's very interesting.
So what sort of work do
Sorry,
you do?
Mate, what was the question you asked?
No, I love it. And this is exactly the sort of topic that we can bounce around on. I've got a set list of notes and thoughts and questions, but the conversation is like, it can go anywhere. And it has, right, already. So I love it. Thank you. These are my favorite ones where it's, it doesn't need to be structured per se. But tell me about some of the kinds of people you work with.
So like you say, sometimes they're kind of military veterans and people who work with trauma. I think because of the work that I've done and some of the studies I've been part of that have really good results around trauma, often there's a lot of people who come to workshops or want to work with me, and they're kind of working directly with nightmares and stuff. Another big group of Buddhists, like lucid dreaming is a big part of Tibetan Buddhism. So you often get people who are using lucid dreaming for a spiritual practice. The aim is, if you can meditate in your dreams, then you can enter this kind of very deep state of meditation at an unconscious level, which can lead to really big kind of insights and awakening. So you might get people who are working with really heavy trauma and nightmares. You might get people who are kind of looking for spiritual enlightenment. A lot of athletes are into lucid. Well, not a lot, but I work with tennis player, basketball player.
Anybody you can say?
Kind of,
who didn't make you sign an NDA?
First, just in case they don't want to know that their secret weapon is lucid dreaming and everyone's got it. I think this is because again, it's probably when people Google it, some of the largest range of scientific studies you get into lucid dreaming around sports. because it's a really good data point to show how lucid dreaming can actually kind of restructure the brain. Because you can basically see like how good is someone at squats in the waking state. You then teach them lucid dreaming, get them to do squats in their lucid dream, and then check what's their personal best of squats the next day. So it's a really good data point. You can kind of see, did it change or stay the same? And essentially you can get better at athletic performance by training in your lucid dreams.
Well, they say about like Johnny Wilkinson, for instance, you know, he used to practice. I've heard him talk specifically about visualization. He says, I've not just practiced that particular kick from that point on the 22 1,000 times in real life this year. I've done it 10,000 times in my mind. And and I guess if you can then take that into lucid dreaming where it feels real but isn't, but the same practice is being given to it, then you can see how that benefits.
Yeah, so basically you can't get more of a visualization than a lucid dream. Visualized practice or visualized therapy in the waking state is in some way dependent on your ability to visualize. Some people can get really strong immersive visualization. Other people, their mind's a bit distracted. They can't kind of go deep into it.
One of my friends can't visualize. One of my friends, if I said to him,
or something,
if I say, think of a red ball, he can't think of a red ball. He can't hold that thought in his head. He knows that a red ball exists. He knows what that thing is, but he can't have like you or I might have a spherical red ball. And I could tell you, oh, it's got a shadow up there, a shading that, you know, but he can't see that. And I think that's absolutely fascinating.
I believe it's called. Yeah,
that's aphasia. That's right.
Yeah, so we have these different levels of the ability to visualize in the waking state. In the lucid dream, it kind of levels the playing field, because lucid dream, you're in a 100% visualization. So any kind of visualized practice that you do in a lucid dream is like maximized. It's like the ultimate peak aspect of it. And the same with visualized healing. You know, people like this, something called the Simerton method, where you like visualize colored light around the point of inflammation, like say you've hurt your elbow or something like that. And they have got proof it does seem to work. They don't quite know how. Maybe it's just relaxing the body, and if you're more relaxed, your immune system works better and stuff like that. Right. You can do that in a lucid dream. And actually, one of the studies we want to do next year is to see if we can prove lucid dream healing. Now, of course, proving it would just be proving the placebo effect, that the mind can affect the body. But it'd be proving the placebo effect in like a closed container, because you know, you're asleep. There's no other kind of variables there. You get people into that as well. So sports people who are looking to kind of work with illnesses that they might have, a kind of physical things. And then, of course, a lot of psychological healing.
So I've just spoken to an ice swimmer, somebody who, you know, he's a world champion ice swimmer. And as you were just talking then, I was thinking of the power of the mind, because you ever been in 0 degree temperature water?
I don't know, man. What are ice baths that you get to do? I think they're about
they're about 4 to 5, the coldest ones. I mean, the average swimming pool is about 25 degrees, and you know when you get in and you're like, bloody hell, it's cold. Yeah, that's about 25 degrees. So for people that think, oh God, 0 must be, it'll be fine. I know what cold is. You don't know what cold is. I've been in 6 degree, and everything feels sausagey. Everything big, and then you start to lose feeling and all these things. But you know, I was speaking to this ice swimmer about the power of his ability to train his mind, and almost, you know, the takeaway was Wim Hof's a baby, because you know he has to do all 20 minutes of breathing to get into that water, and this guy John Might's just in there, you know. So
wow,
cool. It's but you know, as you're talking, then I was just thinking, you know, not of the regenerative or, you know, healing properties, perhaps, you know, I'd be interested to see what that throws up, you know, when you do that study, but equally just the power of the mind is incredible, you know, I think.
Most of us have no idea. Like most of us, it's as if we're going through life like in first gear, when actually we're in like a Ferrari of like 6 gears or something. It's like we just have no idea. And then it's same with our body, right? If I told you, mate, I could run over there that 100-meter mark in 8 seconds, you'd say, fuck off, you can run there in 8 seconds. That's ridiculous. If I could say, mate, I can lift X amount over my head, say, fuck off, you can. That's impossible. That's not possible for human body. But we know that if you train for decades and you're completely one point focused, and maybe you have some genetics to help too, you can do these amazing feats of physical endurance, like this person who's doing the ice swimming, right? And yet we don't seem to apply that same thing to the mind. You know, if you had spent like 3 or 4 decades, you know, in the mind gym for 10 hours or 12 hours a day, it wouldn't be surprising if you could do stuff that seemed to be superhuman. But actually, it's not superhuman, it's just human. But most of us are not really engaging our human capacity.
I adore Darren Brown. Absolutely adore Darren Brown. I think he's phenomenal. And why can he do the things he can do? Because he spent decades in that mind gym, in his literal mind palace, in that in that state where he's able to recall things. Like, how can you memorize a whole phone book or, dictionary or whatever whatever. It's like these techniques that, seem supernatural to you and me. And, I always come back to, again, this probably gets edited out because it's, and out is YouTube algorithmically unfriendly, but Jesus was just a very good Darren Brown. It's like it's like, hit that water in wine, is it? All right, yeah, okay, cool, I'll do that.
Get ready for the death threat coming your way.
Edit. I'm keen to get into the statistics that you've spoken about in relation to PTSD, chronic PTSD. Can you speak to that for me, please?
Yeah, so we had this study. We did the pilot study, then we replicated it in a randomized control where you have like half the group not doing the study, half the group doing it. But both of them we came with the same results. So we had a group in the pilot study, 55 people, all of whom had chronic PTSD. So they had to have like diagnosed PTSD, many of them treatment-resistant PTSD, many of them actually CPTSD, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
What's the difference between PTSD and complex? And I'm sure I can get there. But...
Yeah, so often PTSD can be like a single event trauma. So like one terrible thing happened, or there was one kind of terrible period, but it's usually kind of single event. Complex PTSD is where the trauma has been exposed to trauma over like multiple years. So like if someone is being like abused as a child, it wasn't just once, it was from the age of like 5 to 15 or something. So that would definitely be complex PTSD. A lot of people who've grown up in complex families or families where there's abuse in the household, whether it's physical or emotional, that can often lead to complex PTSD. It's strange. I think probably the cases of single event PTSD are far more rare than we think. Like often someone is presenting with, oh, I feel this way because that one thing happened to me. But actually you realize none of us have really had one thing happen to us. There's so much. And trauma is trauma. I've seen people who've gone into like full combat zones and come back with relatively little trauma, and other people who've had a breakup and are completely traumatized, clinically, absolutely classic PTSD. And it's not just one had a stronger mind than the other. It's like trauma is trauma. Anything that overwhelms your capacity to cope and to integrate the experience.
It's not an overdiagnosis. It's not an overdiagnosis or a misdiagnosis. It's all relative.
It's all relative. Yeah. It's like,
my worst day.
Never think your trauma
my worst day is still my worst day.
Yeah. Yeah. And also actually things like there are certain traumatic experiences that you're exposed to. There was an expectation that you were going to be exposed to them. If you're going into a war zone or a combat zone, there's an expectation. There's some sort of preparation for what might occur.
Right.
Someone who's a civilian who might have a very shocking and very sudden exposure to something that's seemingly less traumatic, but it was the sudden notion and the unexpected notion and the inability of a support structure around them before and after that trauma could lead to a much more traumatizing effect than the person who had the seemingly more traumatic experience but had like a support system and an expectation around what was going to happen. Do you know what I mean? It's very interesting, very complex.
Yeah.
Like I had assumed when I first started working with the veterans that these people, especially combat zone veterans, would have the worst trauma I'd ever seen. These would be the most traumatized people, and civilians would have, what do they know about trauma? 10 years in now of working with these populations anyway, that's a completely incorrect thing to say, totally naive and totally arrogant, really, and based on ignorance. Again, I've seen people who've come out of combat zones with relatively little traumatization, and people who've had a breakup or abandonment, and it's wrecked their lives. Trauma is trauma, whether it's from a war zone or a familial war zone. Like trauma is trauma.
So, of these 55 people, it was a week-long study, right?
Yeah. So the start of the study, we take their PTSD score, which is a bit arbitrary, but it's like a medical way. It's a kind of a checklist of questions which is used to medically diagnose someone's current level of trauma. right? So they took all these tests, and the average trauma level for the group was really high, obviously, right? So everyone had PTSD, so it's way above the medical threshold. Then they have a week with me online learning how to lucid dream. So I'm basically teaching them my standard lucid dreaming workshop, but with a special emphasis on not only how to have lucid dreams, but how to have lucid dreams where they're able to integrate the trauma that is currently affecting them. Now, many of them were only having nightmares anyway, so in their case, it would be becoming lucid in the nightmare, the recurring nightmares they're already having. And first of all, either just staying in there, that was enough. It goes, okay, I'm here, I'm safe, this is just a dream, this is just a dream, but not waking up, intentionally staying there, witnessing, kind of like the exposure therapy we talked about. The second option was to become lucid in their recurring nightmare and then actually change the ending. So, you know, if someone was in a recurring nightmare of a car crash, like, I'm lucid, oh, I'm back in the car crash dream. Okay, well, look, I'm going to make the car fly to safety, or I'm going to make the wall that the car crashed into disappear. You know, kind of change the ending. And that allowed this kind of new non-traumatic memory to replace that old traumatic memory that was stuck on a loop in the nightmare. But actually, the best effect we found was people who could become lucid in a traumatic dream or a nightmare and actually not change the ending, and not just witness it, but intentionally move towards the source of their fear. So if it was the bullets coming to them, rather than running, they would walk towards the bullets and actually not stopping them, not changing them, allowing themselves to walk towards it, knowing the bullets don't exist, I don't exist, this is just a memory, this is just a dream, I'm safe now. You know, and actually saying those words as they walk towards it. That we had a very powerful response with. So they basically learned the lucid dreaming techniques. They learned especially how to use lucid dreaming to work with their fears and traumas. So one woman, for example, her PTSD was manifesting in chronic physical pain, which couldn't be explained by any doctor. They couldn't find it. They said, oh, maybe it's the nerve endings or something, but obviously with the trauma affecting the body. And so for her, she became lucid. In her lucid dream, she called that chronic pain, I release you. I am free of my chronic pain, I release you. And when she did that, in the lucid dream, this huge golden lozenge appeared, like a strepsil, like a throat sweet, right? But it was gold, and it was radiating this light. And she said it was obviously like, she said, I felt the lozenge was like a symbol of healing, you know, it was a symbol of medicine, and it was like radiating this golden light. Another woman in her chronic nightmares, this like recurring nightmare she was having, she became lucid, and then she called into the lucid dream her lioness, which is like her power animal that she'd been working with. And this massive fuck off female lion appears in the lucid dream. And she gets on it like a horse and rides around. And she said it was still a nightmare going on around her, but she was riding a freaking lion. So she was like, I am safe. No one can harm me. I'm a bloody massive giant lion. And she said for the first time in her life, she felt safe in her nightmares and dreams. And there were lots of other examples. So people were using lucid dreaming to either change their nightmare or engage their nightmare with a different perspective. And then at the end of the week, we took their PTSD score again. So the same kind of check to see basically is their level of trauma the same, more or less. And when they originally got the results, I remember because I was kind of asking the results through, and the scientists were like, yeah, but we just need to double check them again. We're not sure. And I was like, why? And they went, oh, we're getting quite bizarre results here. So let's just check again. And the reason they were bizarre results was because it was the average PTSD score for the group had dropped so low, it was actually beneath the medical threshold. And then when they looked at the individual scores, over 80% of the people were now, their level of trauma had dropped so low, they were beneath the medical threshold of diagnosis. So they basically didn't have PTSD anymore. Which was a crazy result. And I was like, whoa, that's nuts, man. Like I've never seen that before. So then, yeah, we agree. And it could be that actually there's some group energy that's being created because you all bonded so much over the week. You've all had these amazing lucid dreams. You've been there, you know, to kind of guide people. So it could be that the next day, suddenly, as soon as the study ends, bam, people's trauma is back. So they said, we need to do a follow-up study 1 month later. So 1 month with no contact with me, no formal lucid dream training. Then we can tell if it's worked. 1 month later, they took their PTSD score again. It actually dropped a little bit below, so it seems to have been continue working. Once they got that, they were like, okay, we've got a month where this seems to be an effective force. So now I think we can publish.
Right. Wow. I mean,
yeah.
Is that a study with the same group that you could replicate now? I mean, when was this study?
We did it online, so it was during lockdown.
Right. So I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 years later. Is it possible that you could return to it to see those same people, those scores, or do you...
Yeah, it's interesting. So it has to be all anonymized, but I know some of the people who are on that study. Like I say about like maybe 6 or 7 of them. So not all of them, but I know 6 or 7 of them who are still doing really, really well. Could be that all the others return to their trauma. Who knows? And unfortunately, because of the anonymization, I can't get back in contact with them. But we did then do another study a couple of years later using same techniques, same protocol, but this time we had a control group, and we managed to replicate results again. So it's only 2 studies, and of course it won't work for everyone. It's not a kind of a carte blanche. It's not a silver bullet for trauma, but we can definitely say for something that's free, that's non-medical, that's non-invasive, that's non-addictive, and that you do it in your sleep, it is a very good possibility for a lot of people who are living with the hell of PTSD and trauma to at least give it a shot. The worst that can happen is nothing. Very few contraindications to lucid dreaming, so it's not going to kind of harm you.
What percentage of people do you think 100% of people can lucid dream? You see like hypnosis counselors and things like that, right? That say, oh, I'll heal your addictions, I'll do X, Y, Z, you know, with using hypnosis. Now, not all people are susceptible to hypnosis. I think I'm quite anti-authority and anti-authoritarian in a way that hypnosis, I don't think would suit me. You know, any time that I've been to watch, we mentioned Darren Brown thing. It's like, I wish it would work, but it just doesn't. There's something about me that's quite resistant to it. And I think it's psychological resistance. You know, I'm like, you can't impact me in that way, but lots of people are suggestible, and that's the ones he wants. They're the suggestibility is everything. Does suggestibility play a part in lucid dreaming, or in the same way as with hypnosis?
Maybe, but I mean, the thing about hypnosis, you're having to give your power over to somebody else. Somebody's hypnotizing you. The cool thing about lucid dreaming, I think why the veterans community is so into it, is you do it yourself. There's no doctor to rely on. There's no therapist to rely on. There's no one to like give your unconscious to. There's a series of techniques that you can learn from me or from books or online. ChatGPT does a great version of me, by the way. I was getting taught by me online. I was like, whoa, it's really doing my voice and everything, because I must be just looking at all the books and kind of using the same phraseology. So you can learn it wherever, but you do it yourself. When you have a lucid dream, you have trained yourself to be lucid. It's only you in there. There's no one else who's going to help you or save you. So I think there's something about that kind of solo activity of lucid dreaming that means, no, it doesn't. Suggestibility kind of won't really play a part because you're doing it yourself. And that also makes it really empowering. You know, one of the weird data points that we got in both those studies was we had some people who in that week, not everyone got lucid in that week. We had about 70% of people having one or more lucid dreams in the week, right? So 30% of people didn't. Of that 30% of people who didn't have a lucid dream in the 1 week study, some of them still had a drop in their PTSD score, which is really weird. And when they spoke about this, they said, yeah, just the thought that we could do this, just the fact that we were learning something by myself, not dependent on any doctor, not dependent on any meds I need to take every night, not dependent on anyone else, that allowed me to kind of feel more okay with my nightmares. And with that, their trauma triggers started to decrease. So it seems like just learning to lucid dream, even before you have the experience, just learning it is such an empowering experience for many people that in itself can help to mitigate some of the trauma they're experiencing. But yeah, it won't work for everyone.
Incredible study. What's the simplest way for a beginner to have a complete beginner to have their first lucid dream?
Yeah, so we're like the 4 Ds, which we can do, which are great for a podcast. So 4 basic techniques all begin with D. Number 1, dream planning. That's basically planning what you want to do in your first or next lucid dream. On both those studies we did, the big technique we used was dream planning. Like, once you're lucid, what are you going to do? Because otherwise you'll just be like me as a teenager. Oh, I just want to fly about. I want to have sex. I want to do this. You need to have a really direct plan. In my first or next lucid dream, when I'm lucid, I am going to call out chronic pain. I release you. Or in the other case, the woman, I'm going to call in my inner lioness into the thing, whatever it is. Or if you're a sports person, I'm going to practice my athletic discipline. Like, know what you want to do in your lucid dream, first of all, because that planting of the intention, that expectation effect, that already starts to bring the lucidity to you. So 1, dream planning. Number 2, dream recall. Unless you regularly remember your dreams, it's going to be kind of a tough job to learn to lucid dream. But everybody dreams every night. When people say I don't dream, what they really mean is I don't remember my dreams. If you sleep, you dream. There's no way to stop the human brain from dreaming. So if you're sleeping, you're dreaming. Why aren't you remembering? Well, when did you last try? When did you last really fall asleep going, right, tonight I remember my dreams. I know I'm dreaming. I know my brain is going to dream state every 90 minutes. So I'm going to remember my dreams tonight. If you can fall asleep with that really strong intention, saying to yourself, tonight I remember my dreams, I have excellent dream recall, you're very likely to actually kind of hypnotize yourself. You're falling asleep into that real belief and real expectation that you'll remember your dreams. So dream recall is a really good one to kind of start remembering your dreams, because when you become lucid in a dream, it's basically because you've remembered what your dreams are like. So let's say after a week of remembering your dreams and writing them down, that's the third D, dream diaries, writing them down. At the end of the week, you look in your dream diary and you think, oh yeah, I always dream of my dead grandma. Or, God, I often dream about being back on that beach we used to go to as a kid on family holidays. You start seeing these patterns, like things that you only dream about but don't happen in real life. Now, eventually, you'll start to become so aware of those patterns. The next week, you'll be dreaming of your dead grandma, and you'll be looking at dead grandma in the dream and be like, you'll get the sense of deja vu. It's a very strange sensation. You're like, dead grandma, I swear she's, oh, on the beach I was as a kid. Oh, it's really reminding me of something. Oh shit, this is what I dream about. Bam, I'm dreaming right now. So we see how dream recall and the act of writing down your dreams allows you to get to know the landscape of your dream. And the way you become lucid is you recognize the landscape when you're in it. So basically you need to really remember your dreams, write them down, get really good dream recall, and then eventually we'll start spotting your fourth D, which is dream signs. These are things like dead grandmas, being in places you used to live but no longer live, being back at school if you're an adult, being like friends with celebrities, whatever it is, the weird things that only happen in your dreams. By keeping the dream diary, you start to take a note of those. And then before bed, you remind yourself, you're like, oh, what are my current dream signs? What do I often dream about? I keep on dreaming about surfing, even though I haven't been for ages. I keep on dreaming my dead grandma. And then before bed, you like program yourself, where between now and I wake up, I see my dead grandma, I know that I'm dreaming. I know that I'm dreaming. So this really, really strong intention. So that the next time you dream about those things, that trigger is engaged and you're like, oh shit, I'm dreaming right now. Of course, there are like dozens of other techniques and whole books worth of techniques.
Well,
those
you've written 3 books, is that right?
5. Well, like 4.5, because one of them's a second edition. But yeah.
Okay, so let me rephrase that. You've written 5 books.
4.5. Yeah, I've got Dreams of Awakening, which is the kind of lucid dreaming, more on the like spiritual path. And then Lucid Dreaming Made Easy, which is like a dummy's guide to lucid dreaming. So that one's for everyone. And then Wake Up to Sleep. That's the trauma-affected sleep one. That's based on all the work with the veterans and stuff like that. There's a lot of breath work in that, deep relaxation, as well as lucid dreaming. And then the shadow work books, Dreaming Through Darkness and Do the Shadow Work, which is all about, facing your dark side and going to the places that scare you.
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions, and I appreciate time. I'm going to wrap up fairly soon.
Sure.
But you talk about meeting your shadow in dreams. What is the shadow, and how does somebody know they've actually met it?
Yeah, so the shadow is the side of yourself you repress, deny, or disown. So it's like a psychological concept, really. The shadow is made up of anything you hide from yourself and others. So it's the dark side of our psyche, but not dark meaning bad or evil, dark meaning yet to be illuminated. So like what parts of yourself do you keep in the shadows and not illuminate? We might go straight to the kind of more seemingly negative parts, so like, oh, your Google search history, oh, keep that in the shadows, or like my secret racism, I keep that in the shadows, or my sexual shame, I keep that in the shadows, or my infidelity, I keep that in, all this stuff that we kind of hide from others, right? That might make up your dark shadow. So it's still the stuff you reject, deny, and disown, but it could be destructive if you let it get out of hand. But there's also the golden shadow, which is still stuff that you hide from yourself and others, but it's stuff like your hidden talents, elements of your sexuality. Talking of rugby players, I was teaching in Wales once, and there's a rugby player there, and we were talking about golden shadow, and he said, I think I know what my golden shadow is. I love to sing. And I was like, oh yeah. And he goes, yeah, I love to sing, but if any of the guys at the rugby club saw me, they'd never let me live it down. So I drive 2 towns out of Cardiff to go and sing in the karaoke bars, but I love it. When I sing, I feel alive. Is that my golden shadow? I was like, yes, absolutely. It's stuff that you hide from others and maybe even from yourself, but that makes you feel really alive. So the golden shadow is really important too. And how do we meet the shadow in our dreams? So much of our dream content is made of shadow, because it's what we hide and keep out of conscious awareness in the daytime. So when we go to sleep at night, bam, it comes up. And in its most amplified form, the dark shadow expresses itself as our nightmares and our trauma dreams and our anxiety dreams. And golden shadow manifests as those amazing dreams of insight that you have. Every now and again you have a brilliant dream where you really get a clear insight on your life, or you might receive some sort of like spiritual teachings in the dream, or these kind of big insights. Those would be golden shadow dreams.
What has your own shadow taught you?
Oh God, so much. God, what's it taught me in a nutshell? Be kind. I guess that's what it's taught me. Be kind.
It's the golden rule, isn't it? It's the treat others as you want to be treated yourself. The golden rule. That's what we try and teach our children, and I think we forget it very, very easily and quickly.
And I think we can sometimes think we're the only ones who are working with this stuff we're working with. And when you start to look at your shadow, you're like, oh shit, well, everybody else has got this stuff too. They've all got shame. They've all got, sexual insecurities. They've all got parts of themselves they feel that are wounded, that seem traumatized, that seem like they'll never be healed. And then you walk down the street and you realize, oh, we're all working with the same stuff. We're not in the same boat. I mean, the patriarchy means that at least 50% of us are definitely not in the same boat, let alone when you're being in race and society and all of these different barriers that we have in life. But we're all in the same storm. We're all in different boats. We're in the same storm, and it's that storm of the unenlightened human condition. And it's tough. It's tough being a human being. Everyone you've ever known will die. Every relationship you've ever been in will end. Suffering is a big part of life.
How much of that did Buddhism teach you? And are you still practicing?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I lived in a Buddhist center for like 7 years, and now I live kind of down the road from one, which is ironic. My level of attachment to Buddhism was so much I had to stay within stone's throw of the Buddhist temple. I
could get another. We could talk for another hour or two minimum about just that. So maybe you can come on at some other stage, because there's definitely so much we could touch on there. But I want to try and keep it around lucid dreaming for now. Buddhism, fascinating. There's that common thought that we don't ever dream about our mobile phones. The thing that we're attached to, the thing that almost makes us, a cyborg. It may as well be. It's attached to so many of us. We open it so much. Why don't we dream about mobile phones or technology in the way that you might expect to? Yeah,
good point. We spend so many hours on our phones, and we dream about day residue. What happened in our day? Why aren't we always dreaming on our phones? Some people listen to this, I actually do dream on my phone, but it's rare. And if you look at the amount of time we spend, it's very rare. It could be one of the things that the dreaming mind actually kind of struggles to replicate the detailed image of a phone screen. Actually, for lucid dreaming, you can use that. If you're using like digital appliances and they're not working in the dream, then that can be like an indicator. They're not working, could be an indication that you're in a dream. So you do these kind of checks on your phone and stuff. But I think also it's to do with like, this isn't our first rodeo. We assume that all the dreams are coming from just this life we've lived. And actually in this life, phones have only been really part of our life for the last 20, 30 years max. There's a lot of dream content. There's a lot of psychological experience that humanity's had, which has had no time for phones. So I think they're quite new. Whether someone's listening to the podcast in 50 years time, they might be, oh no, we all dream of our phones all the time. They become so embedded in culture. Children who've had them from a really young age, maybe they do dream of them compared to adults, where half our life we had them, half our life we didn't.
Touching on technology as well, something you said earlier made me realize that so much of like Mark Zuckerberg's, the whole metaverse notion, this idea of pushing us into VR-like states, or society that is predicated on having something on your head, this headset that enables you to go into another world. Effectively, we can do that, and we can do that now for free every night, should we learn how to. And yet this is a thing that costs thousands. My son, my 14-year-old, he'll put his VR headset on and play, and he'll love to be in that world. But it's something we can do now. And
the graphics of lucid dreaming, like I'm quite into VR too. I've got VR headset and stuff like that. And I wish for the time where it's really, you cannot tell the difference between the waking world, but we're not there yet. But a lucid dream is so real. I mean, the reason why people often get so excited the first time they get lucid, because you think it's going to look like a dream, doesn't it? It looks like this. That old thing of, pinch yourself to see if you're dreaming. If you're in a lucid dream, pinch yourself. The first thing that's crazy, you'll feel the hairs on your arms. Like, whoa, the level of detail. And the next thing is you'll feel pain. And you think, hang on, nothing's being pinched. It's dream fingers pinching a dream arm. Am I experiencing dream pain? And you're like, whoa, the power of mind.
So there is like a haptic kind of feedback loop in.
Completely. God, this is why lucid dream sex is so seductive, because you're having a mindgasm, not just an orgasm. It's like the best sex you can ever have.
Let's a few questions just to try and finish off. Then I'll move on. What becomes possible for somebody who takes sleep and dreams seriously for the first time in their lives?
I think you gain a lot of your life back. You know, we're asleep for like a third of our lives. And it seems crazy that we don't want to do anything with that time. We see it as either wasted time or we see it as complete blackout time. But actually, there are hundreds of hours of our life which we'll spend in the dream world.
I guess you got those tech bros that are like, you know, I sleep 3 hours a night, and you know, and I'm great. And it's like, actually, you could potentially be maximizing. You know, if you want to, and you don't want fun, and you don't want to do these things, you could be maximizing your learnings, and you know, and practicing things, you know, in this way.
Yeah, that whole thing about, you know, I'll sleep when I die. So it's like, no, you'll die if you don't sleep, dude. It's like, okay, in the early 2000s, there was this, all the studies weren't in. There was this thing of, oh, maybe you don't need so much sleep. Now, like, based on meta-analysis of the last 250 sleep studies, it's still 7 to 9 hours per person per night. Sorry, per person per 24-hour period. So that's really important. So if you're only getting like 5 or 6 hours at night, but you can get a cheeky 2-hour nap during the day, you're still within that threshold of 7 to 9 hours. But for most people, 7 to 9 hours. And it's like, it's weird because people think, oh, if I only sleep 4 hours a night, then I'll get like 4 extra hours of productivity in the day. Actually, if you slept 8 hours, you would get much more done in the remaining hours of the day because you would have a brain that's working optimally. For anything less than 6 hours, definitely 5 hours and less, your brain's in a state of suboptimal functioning. And the most crazy study they did was they got people who were having like 5 to 6 hours sleep a night, but were claiming that they were totally fine. They were like CEOs, they're running businesses, all this kind of stuff. And they put them in a brain scanner. And they showed that although they believed their brain was totally fine and that they were working at an optimal level, their brain showed that the brain doesn't lie. The brain showed that parts of it were locked down, but they weren't fully activated. And that was scary because I was like, whoa, it's not just that some people are chronically sleep deprived, that some people sleep deprivation has become so normal that it's become the benchmark. And they haven't had good sleep for so long, they think that's normal.
Right.
And for them, I think, well, yeah, if you think you're CEO of business and doing all this stuff on 4 hours, imagine if you could get 6 or 8.
Well, it's like when you've been living with an injury and then you have an operation or something, right? And it's like, well, you just think, well, this is life. Or imagine what it might be like to be obese and then to lose all that weight. And you're like, that's how I used to feel. What's one dream you'll never forget for as long as you live?
Oh, wow. Good question. Probably a dream when my mum had died. And I'd been thinking, like, when my mum died, because she did lucid dreaming stuff too. I was like, imagine if I get lucid and then see if I can like communicate with my mum's spirit. Because in Buddhism, there's this belief that like you're reborn, right? But there's like a 49-day period after someone's died where they're in this kind of, it's called the bardo. It's kind of a holding space between the end of this life and rebirth into the next. And it said that if you become lucid, you can kind of communicate with them in this space. So I was really trying it and I was just nothing. I could barely sleep, let alone have lucid dreams. But after about, in fact, I know exactly, it's 21 days, I did manage to become lucid. And I was in my dream and I was like, Mom, are you in here? Are you in here? And I thought, well, yeah, it'll just be a projection of my mind, right? The memory of my mom. And then I saw her and it was so almost kind of cliche. Like she looked how she did at her best. She must be about like 40 years old. How I remember my mom as a kid, you know, in this kind of not in the state that she died in. And she was walking down the street and I went, Mom. And she looked like she didn't recognize me. And then I realized, oh yeah, I'm in my current form. Of course she wouldn't recognize me if she was 40. I would have been a kid at that time. And then I went, Diana Marshall. I used her name. And she went, oh. And then I saw her look at me and she went, oh. And she recognized me. And it was just like the emotion welled. And I woke up. And I have no idea whether it was actually my mum or whether it was just my projection of my mum and me dealing with the grief of losing her and stuff like that. But I know that it helped. The day after that dream, I felt like there was some letting go process, that I was able to like have that final goodbye to her. So whether it was real or not doesn't really matter. I mean, you know, what is real, right? But it felt real to my mind, and that was really helpful.
Again, thank you for sharing that. That's the big thing to share. But you know, I'm very grateful. And then I feel like we could get into the kind of parallel universe theory and all that stuff, and we won't. That's we can do that a part two. Two more questions. If you could plant one thought into the minds of everyone listening or watching this tonight, what would you want them to dream of?
I don't know. Who am I to tell you what to dream of? But I would want to plant the suggestion, like, learn to lucid dream. Like, it's a learnable skill, and it completely transforms the third of your life you spend asleep. And I said it's free, it's non-medical, it's non-addictive. You do it in your sleep. Like, learn to lucid dream. Not necessarily through me, but just learn it. It's a brilliant skill that can profoundly change your life.
Are you addicted to it? Like, how often would you say you lucid dream?
Oh, like, I've got an 8-month-old baby, man. I haven't been doing any practice for ages. Like, the first few weeks, she gave me a lot of lucid dreams, actually, because she was waking all the time. I'd have these dreams that I would buy a crib, and then she'd be in my lucid dream with me and stuff. But no, at the moment, I'm doing very little practice.
Right.
But it's like anything, like sports. Sometimes you're doing a lot of gym work and you're in really good shape. Other times, circumstances don't allow you to do it.
It is a spinning plate exercise. That's how I feel about business and life. I mean, and everybody does, right? Business, life, kids. I think as a podcast, this for me is, I love some of the your Diary CEOs and Modern Wisdoms and and all these Huberman and all these people. They're wonderful, but for many of them, children aren't a reality quite yet. They might well be in the future, but their responsibilities don't extend to children just yet. And it's wonderful to imagine a life where you can solely focus on business or fitness, or maybe those two things combine. But then you've got an 8-month-old. Add that to the equation, and there's not a man alive, there's not a woman alive that can wake up at 4 for the first of their 3 runs that day. Are you gonna no, I'm just heading to the gym for the first of my 2 sessions today. It's back in back in the morning, legs in the evening. No, it doesn't happen. But so I hope through this podcast there's some relatability and some understanding of we all want to be happier, healthier, more fulfilled. How? And that's essentially why I'm talking to incredible people like yourself. Can you finish a sentence for me, please? Anything is possible
if you harness the power of your dreams.
Very on brand, very succinct. I love it. Where can people find out more about you?
Just my website, charliemorley.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. Apparently, if you just Google Charlie Lucid, all my stuff comes up. So just need to remember my first name and what I do. Charlie Lucid.
There you go. Thanks, Charlie. This has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are back. I learned a lot. Did you learn a lot? Good guy, fascinating. Imagine just what a cool thing to do for a living. So, really, really enjoyed that. Thank you for being with me as ever, being a viewer, being a possibilist, being a listener. You are hugely appreciated. I am, as ever, having a lot of fun with this. I am back on Monday with another fantastic interview. This is with Andrew Kigwell. Andrew is the CEO of Realbotics. Realbotics is the global leader in robotics and AI, and bringing those two things together to create as close to, I guess, humans as possible. And we get, again, knowledge gap, curiosity gap, what's truly possible. We get into it all. It's a fascinating conversation, fascinating dive into, why do these things exist? It's kind of, if you've watched Westworld, I guess lots of sci-fi, fiction over the last couple of decades, then you'll know that robots, and especially humanoid robots, play an enormous part in our prospective future. So we talk about it. We talk about relationships. We talk about why humans feel this innate need to build and create and build relationships with these robots. Where can they be useful? Where might it go wrong? All of these things. So yeah, interesting one coming on Monday. If you haven't subscribed already, do so. If you don't follow me already, Richley Pod, Leigh Pod, and I will see you next week.